All right, we are almost into Playtest 7. So I'm doing a reaction video, and it's about to start here in 10 seconds.
Hello everyone, we've got another Unearthed Arcana with Jeremy Crawford, and shortly after this video you will have access to that PDF, and as always we need your playtest feedback.
Long wait.
We have a lot of classes, we have a lot of subclasses, and a whole bunch of stuff to dive into. What can we expect?
So in Unearthed Arcana for the Player's Handbook, and this is number 7, we are returning to the classes that were featured in UA 5. So that's the Fighter, the Barbarian, the Sorcerer, the Warlock, and the Wizard. And now making revisions to those classes based on the feedback we got on UA 5.
Right.
In addition to that, so in addition to getting to see a new take on those 5 classes, now reflecting feedback we received, we're also including a bunch of other subclasses. So just as we did for the classes that were in UA 6, we're now suddenly each class.
All right, I guess I should start by saying no big surprise. The monk is not going to be in Playtest 7. I didn't think it would. I think it'll be in Playtest 8. And I do expect major changes to the monk. I expect their feedback was strong on that one. But this is not a surprise. We're going to see the classes we saw in Unearthed Arcana 5 get reworked based on their feedback.
Had multiple subclasses as a part of the playtest. We're now doing that for these classes as well. And that includes even 2 brand new subclasses. You're going to see a brand new subclass in the Barbarian called the Path of the World Tree.
It's very cool.
And also a brand new subclass in the Fighter called the Brawler.
Yeah.
And
Brawler.
These 2
are
nice. Really fun subclasses. One of them, the Brawler, is all about...
All right, so we're getting a pugilist. That's great.
About being a fighter who specializes in improvised weapons and unarmed strikes. This is the fighter who might spend more time clobbering people with chairs than with conventional weapons. And we think people are going to have a ball with it. And then the Path of the World Tree is a barbarian subclass that delves into the cosmic story of D&D, that there is this world tree that actually connects all worlds, and this barbarian, when they rage, taps into the power of that tree. And one of the I think iconic things for this subclass is being able to summon up the roots of the world tree to pull people toward the barbarian. I like to think of people running away from this barbarian and this barbarian going, and using these
Okay, this sounds, I got to see the mechanics. This sounds fantastic.
Mystic roots of the tree to pull people toward them.
Yeah.
At higher level, you'll even be able to use the roots of the tree to take yourself and your companions to a teleportation circle elsewhere in the world that you're on, or even to another plane of existence. So this is also a rare case of the Barbarian class in one of its subclasses gaining access to things like planar travel or long distance teleportation. And this is us exploring the edges of each class. We do this with subclasses where we...
Now again, we're going to have to see the mechanics, but I just hope they realize that giving a barbarian ability to do something like planar travel, which sounds great, but that is a utility feature. It should not replace martial features. It should be kind of a flavor thing added on. Like if you're playing a spellcaster, you don't have to give up your 6th or 7th level spells that do good things in combat just so that you can do planar travel. Or teleportation. So hopefully it doesn't become a replacement for features that the barbarian needs.
We sort of pace out the outer boundaries of each class and see, is there some theme we haven't hit yet in this class? And we're doing that with Path of the World Tree in the Barbarian, as well as in the Fighter. the fighter's identity has long been the master of weapons and armor, and we realized that something we hadn't explored yet in 5th edition is being the master of also improvised weapons. And so this fighter is going to be able to pick up all sorts of odds and ends and then apply weapon mastery properties to them. So the brawler especially is able to...
Now, the monk needed something like that, I'll just say.
delve into the new weapon mastery system and take some of those properties and apply them to this table leg or that poker from next to the fire.
Oh, that's going to be fun with expertise, yeah.
Or this broken bottle. The brawler is all about taking things in the environment or the brawler's own body and using those things as weapons.
That's perfect.
And then we have, again, revised versions of the subclasses in all of these 5 classes. We also have some revised spells in this UA.
Yay!
Sorceress Burst and Arcane Eruption return from UA 5. Those spells were enjoyed, and so they're here again. They've been tweaked. We also have a new version of Counterspell for people to try out,
Nice.
and a new version of the Jump Spell for people to experiment with. But I maybe can talk more about those things once we dive into the classes.
Yeah, so where do you want to start? Do you like alphabetically?
Did the jump spell need addressed more than the shield spell? I mean, anyway.
Yeah, sure. How about we do the Barbarian and the Fighter first?
Okay.
Although, before we dive into any particular class, one other thing I should point out that pertains not only to the spellcasters in this Unearthed Arcana, but also the spellcasters who appeared in the previous Unearthed Arcana, UA 6. The survey for which is closed, and actually our team is now going through the feedback on UA 6. A big shift in UA 7 is in UA 7 we are going back to using class spell lists. We've been having fun for a number of Unearthed Arcanas, experimenting with the Arcane, Divine, and Primal lists. But what we have found is that while those lists worked very well for certain classes, for instance, it was a big boost.
Now, here's my question. Are they going to have the Bard in Unearthed Arcana 7? Because the Bard in Unearthed Arcana 6, their spell list was selected from one of the 3. So if we're going to go to class spell lists, that doesn't work anymore. So I hope they address that. Otherwise, you can't use the Playtest Bard.
Boon for the Ranger to gain access to the entire Primal list. We have found that for other classes, shifting to those big lists tended to dampen their identity. For example, the Wizard, a big part of their identity in the game is having the biggest spell list in the game.
Right.
And by multiple classes now essentially sharing the Wizard's spell list, the fan response was understandably that the Wizard's identity was being diminished. We also found that in this Unearthed Arcana, the return to Warlocks having pact magic, that also meant, and that's a spoiler because we haven't gotten to the Warlock yet.
Yeah.
But yes, Warlocks have returned to having pact magic in this UA.
It's not really a spoiler. You already told us that was happening.
They need to also go back to having their own spell list because given how pact magic works, where you have this constrained set of spell slots that all sort of move up to your highest level slot, means Warlocks must have, when they have pact magic, a heavily curated spell list. Because there are some spells that just become too powerful if you get to just push the 5th level version button of that over and over and over again. We also have found that as much fun as we had experimenting with the Bard, getting to choose.
I'm sorry, I'm going back a few seconds here. Remember, this is the first time I've watched. But he says that you got to curate the Warlock spell list because there's certain spells that you don't want them to be able to just upcast at 5th level over and over again. And I'm just curious because there's nothing that comes to my mind right away where there's a lower level than 5th level spell that you don't want them upcasting when they could just cast 5th level spells. So is there a lower level spell upcast to 5th level that is more powerful than a 5th level spell? Let me know in the comments if you can think of any.
From one of those 3 lists, you and I talked about it in a previous video. It's a really neat story idea. We have found that there are some identity degrading characteristics of that for the Bard, and so we were also eager to get back to class spell lists for the Bard.
Okay, so the Bard is being addressed.
In summary, you're going to see all the spellcasters in UA7 are back to using class spell lists, and the classes that appeared in UA6 will also go back to using class spell lists. So that's an important overview thing that connects not only to the Sorcerer, the Warlock, and the Wizard who are in UA7, but also to the Eldritch Knight who is in UA7.
Right.
Because the Eldritch Knight, rather than referring to the Arcane spell list, just as the subclass does in 2014, uses the Wizard spell list.
All right, let's talk about the Barbarian. I'm really excited for the new one because I love Idrisil stuff. I love World Tree stuff. So
the Barbarian, the base class, has received a number of tweaks and enhancements. Danger Sense from 2014, it is back at 2nd level, and we've now made it so that it works even if you have the blinded or deafened condition.
Oh, nice.
We wanted to make it easier for the Barbarian to use this feature, particularly given the fact that many Barbarian features they're not magical per se, but there is an extraordinary quality to them. The Barbarian is one of those classes in a kind of interesting gray area between our full-on magical classes and then our classes like the Fighter and the Rogue, who at their sort of base form have no magic. The Barbarian, because of their rage and some of their other capabilities, are in this interesting realm in between, full-on magic over here and no magic over here. The Monk is another example of a class that's in that sort of in-between space. And so with that in mind, we decided to relax the restriction on Danger Sense. We also have made an important tweak to Reckless Attack. We've now made it so that all of its effects last until the start of your next turn.
Okay, that is fantastic and new. So Reckless Attack in the 2014 Player's Handbook can only be used on your turn. So if you're making a reaction attack off turn, you can't use Reckless Attack even if you used it on your turn. So it sounds like they're extending it. That's terrific.
That might seem minor, but it's actually huge because it now means
huge.
Barbarians can benefit from Reckless Attack on things like an opportunity attack, but also in subclass features like Retaliation. And so really, if you turn on Reckless Attack, you're not only going to benefit from it on the turn you activated it on, but you will also benefit from it should you take a reaction before the start of your next turn, like an opportunity attack, and so you're going to get advantage on that attack roll as well. This also has the nice effect of unifying the feature's duration, because the way we had it before, essentially the good part for the Barbarian lasted only until the end of the turn on which you activate.
So far it sounds like the Barbarian is just getting buffed, which is surprising and pleasing, but it's a little surprising because I know that the Barbarian got a very high satisfaction score in UA5, but it sounds like they're doing additional buffs. That's great. So we've got Danger Sense. It sounds like it's just going to be advantage on dexterity saves, which it always should have been, and it's back to 2nd level. And then we have Reckless Attack now lasting so that you can make attacks off your turn and still get advantage from that. And I'm assuming we're still getting the other buffs for Barbarian as well that we saw in UA5. So it sounds like the Barbarian's doing pretty well here.
The feature, but the bad part lasted until the start of your next turn. So we've decided we're just going to have one duration for the entire feature, and that means the Barbarian gets that sort of juiciness in more circumstances during a battle. We've also made some level shifts. You're going to see that in all of the classes, where in a few places a feature may not have changed in how it functions, but its level has changed. So an example of that is primal knowledge has moved to level 3 from level 2, and that was in response to both feedback that it felt like it was crowding out danger sense at level 2,
Okay.
and also we gave primal knowledge with a different function in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything at 3rd level, so we decided to unify there and have that feature now be at 3rd level. Speaking of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we have also imported, responding to popular demand, imported Instinctive Pounce from Tasha's Cauldron.
Nice.
And you're actually going to see that a lot in this UA, and we will continue to do the same thing for the classes that were in UA 6, of bringing over popular tech from Tasha's Cauldron. We were intentionally careful about how much we did that earlier in this UA process, partly because we wanted to experiment with some things that weren't in Tasha's.
Yeah.
But we've actually been really gratified how much during the playtest process people have indicated in their comments, oh, I really like that feature from Tasha's. Can you just give that to us all the time?
Yeah.
So you're going to see a lot of those features ending up in the final versions of.
So there you go. When we get to the monk, start expecting things like key. I've forgotten the names of all of them. Key focus, strike, or all those ones. So the monk is going to get their Tasha's features
Of these classes. We have also restored Brutal Critical to being a die roll, but rather than being a roll of one of your weapon dice, we've made it just, no matter what weapon you're using, it's a D12.
Okay.
And we did this because we want the Barbarian to feel good.
It's been nerfed. So brutal. It was in UA5, if I remember correctly, it was your Barbarian level flat. So if you gain it at 11th level, that's plus 11 critical damage. D12 is going to be 6.5 average damage, so they've nerfed it.
Good about Brutal Critical, no matter what weapon you're wielding. Because there used to be this, in some cases, feel good because of the weapon you chose and how it interacted with Brutal Critical. But then other cases where there was feel bad because you almost felt like the weapon you were wielding was punishing you when you scored a critical hit.
Right.
So we've now made it that no matter what you're wielding as a barbarian, if you score a critical hit, you get to add a D12 onto that.
Like if you've got a spoon.
It could have been 2D12.
You get to roll D12 on that.
You're a barbarian.
Yeah.
And that goes up. So at 13th level, it increases to 2d12, and then at 17th level to 3d12 that you are adding. No.
I'll have to do the math on that. 13th level, 2d12. It's probably still weak, but I'll have to punch some numbers.
Some barbarians were already doing that in 2014, but now we've made it so all barbarians, no matter what you're wielding, you're going to have truly brutal criticals. And one of the interactions we expect with the Barbarian is that you'll often be using Reckless Attack, and anytime you have advantage, you are increasing the odds that you're going to score a critical hit. I bring this up because sometimes we see requests for the Barbarian to have a crit range expander like the Champion Fighter does. And the main reason we have not introduced such a crit range expander to the base Barbarian class is because of Reckless Attack. And so in many ways, I think it's good for people to think of Reckless Attack as that is your crit expander.
Yeah.
Because anytime you're rolling multiple d20s to determine whether you hit or not, you are upping the chance that one of those dice is going to have a 20 on it.
Yeah.
And then we have some things returning to the levels that they were at previously. And because of Primal Champion returning to level 20, it now gives you the full +4 to your strength and con that it did.
That's good, because they nerfed it in UA5 to +2s, so I'm glad to see that back to +4s.
In 2014.
Perfect. That's a lot. What are the barbarians are also
Are
showing
they also going back to unlimited rages? Because that would be nice.
up in this?
We have the Path of the Berserker, Path of the Wild Heart, Path of the World Tree, and Path of the Zealot. Now, one of those names might have sounded unfamiliar, Path
Path of the Wild Heart. Let me guess. Wild magic.
of the Wild Heart.
Right.
That is the subclass formerly known as the Path of the Totem Warrior.
Oh.
Same subclass,
Sorry.
new name.
Sorry.
People who've played Baldur's Gate 3
Yeah,
will
Baldur's Gate
recognize
3,
the
I
name,
should have
Yes.
known.
Yeah.
because that's the name there. And what many people don't know, which I can reveal in this video, is we worked, and by we I mean I personally worked with Larian to name that subclass.
Yeah.
And we knew at the time that we would end up unifying the name when we eventually came to the 2024 Player's Handbook version of the game. So first off, I can really quickly say the Berserker is back, but with very little changed in it. It was super popular the last time we showed it.
Right.
So we saw, all right, people dig it. And the only change we've made there is that Intimidating Presence is now a bonus action rather than an action. So
Great.
it's going to be even easier
Great.
to strike fear into the hearts of people who are around you on the battlefield. When it comes to
The Berserker was really good in UA5, and I guess my chief question will be, are these other subclasses going to measure up?
Path of the Wild Heart, the overall shape of this subclass is the same as it was in 2014, where you have certain supernatural abilities connected to animals, and that includes, you gain the ability to use the Beast Sense spell, the Commune with Nature spell,
Right.
and then at the other levels, you pick an animal and you get a characteristic associated with that animal. What's different here is, first off, we have retuned many of these options. There are 9 of these options, so I'm not going to go into every chain.
9 is, I assume he's talking about more than one level, not 9 each level increase. But the main thing, of course, is the bear totem was better than everything else. So are they going to make everything more balanced against it?
Right.
Just as in our videos about changes to meta magic or eldritch invocations, we also did not go into every single
Well,
one.
yeah, that's why we have a PDF on the,
Yes.
on the site,
and,
right?
and I encourage people to dive into the design notes, not only in the Path of the Wild Heart, but in every other section of this PDF, because we have summarized there for you what changed. The sort of top line of what's changed in these 9 different animal options is we have taken some of them that before were lackluster and made them better. And we've taken some, and mostly one, that was wildly overpowered and brought it in line with the others. That one I'm talking about,
Bear totem?
which probably most Barbarian players know what I'm talking about, is the bear option at level 3.
Right.
So I have to tell it to everybody straight that the bear option is no longer going to give you resistance to every damage type but one. Instead, it will now.
How are you going to make this up to people?
Instead,
Why are you smiling?
You now will choose 2 damage types
that
you have resistance to.
Right.
We've also now made it so that whenever you gain a barbarian level, you can change any of these animal options that you have selected.
Okay.
Because we want people to really dig into the fantasy of...
All right, so that is going to be super unpopular. I guarantee it.
You're drawing on power from different animal aspects, not necessarily one all the time. To help reinforce that theme, we've also renamed 6 of the 9 options. It used to be that they were all bear, eagle, or wolf, and those 3 were repeated throughout the subclass. Bear, eagle, and wolf remain at level 3, but at levels 6 and 14, all the animal names are different. We've done this also partly because people, despite the fact the 2014 rules said otherwise, have sometimes had the misimpression that if they chose bear at the beginning, they had to choose bear all the way through. Or if they
Right.
choose wolf at the beginning, they had to choose wolf all the way through. It's now impossible to have that perception because none of the animal names are repeated.
Right.
So now at level 6, instead of having eagle, you have owl. Instead of having wolf, you have spider. Instead of having bear, you have elephant, and so on and so forth. And again, you're going to see a lot of tweaks here that are mostly aimed at trying to make all of these options attractive. We know that some of them are more situational than others, which is also why we've made it so that you can swap them out.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a lot of fun for people to play with. We've talked a little bit about the Path of the World Tree, brand new subclass, all about tapping into both the life-giving energy of the World Tree, but also its planar abilities, because the World Tree is connected to every world of the multiverse. And so two of the main themes you see here are healing and teleportation.
Yeah.
And
control.
yes, yeah, because it's not just teleporting yourself, it's also teleporting others
Yeah.
using the spectral roots and branches of the World Tree itself. And so this is all about being the barbarian who is not only resilient and able to provide some resilience for others, but also providing battlefield control. It's a, again, fun new take for the barbarian, followed by a revised version of the Path of the Zealot. The last time we saw the Path of the Zealot was
so Zealot
Xanathar's Guide to
Barbarian
Everything.
is happening.
And if you're already familiar with the subclass, it's going to look like a familiar friend now. But again, with some quality of life and balance tweaks. And so, like Divine Fury, you now get to determine the damage type that
All right, so place your bets. Is Deathless Rage getting nerfed?
it deals each time you do it. With Warrior of the Gods, it gives you some additional self-healing. Now Zealous Presence you can use multiple times between long rests by expending uses of your rage. And Rage Beyond Death, you now actually turn into a warrior spirit for a limited time after you successfully use your relentless rage.
Nice.
And so we expect that each of these
So they just replaced
features in the Path of the Zealot that people already enjoyed, I think they're going to enjoy them even more. But of course, we'll find out in the surveys.
Right.
And if it turns out people prefer it the old way, we always have the old way we can return to.
Well, I'm very excited for the fighter. I mean, I've always loved Eldritch Knight, so but also I'm so excited for just weapon mastery.
So he's already announced that they received from the surveys that Weapon Adept and Weapon Expert were not overly popular, and they were going to tweak them. I assume to make them more potent. So that is my main curiosity: is what's going to happen with those two features.
As well, and the shenanigans that are now available. So yeah, let's jump in.
So in the fighter, we made a number of fun changes that are about essentially taking what people loved in the previous UA and turning up the volume. So one example right away at first level of us turning up the volume is not only did people previously make it clear they loved weapon mastery, but they especially loved it in the fighter. And so one of the things we've done in the fighter is the fighter now has even more weapon masteries. So fighters now cap out at 6 weapon masteries.
Oh, nice.
And people liked the ability that fighters got at higher level to swap out a weapon mastery property on a weapon for another.
Yeah.
But there's another example of us turning up the volume. It was clear, though, that they found it unsatisfying that you could switch out only one. So we have now created a brand new feature called Master of Armaments, which the fighter gets at level 9, which allows you to swap out the mastery properties on all of your mastery weapons.
Nice.
Not just one,
Yeah.
every single one of them. And so this is going to make it so that the fighter is supremely adaptable in how
That is not. I mean, it's a buff, but it's a smaller buff than I expected.
they use their weapons.
And they can turn any weapon into any type of weapon. You know, in a way, like that's kind of the fantasy of being a fighter. Like everything is a threat. Everything in your hands is a weapon.
Well, especially in the new Brawler subclass.
Yeah.
Where that is literally true.
Right, yeah.
Anything in their hand can be a devastating weapon. We've also now, and going back to the theme of incorporating things from Tasha's Cauldron, people liked in Tasha's Cauldron the ability to swap out their fighting style feats, so which was in Tasha's Cauldron in a feature called Martial Versatility. So we've now incorporated that capability right into the fighting style feature. So fighters can now, when they level up, change that feat if you don't like the one that you chose before. We've also, in Second Wind at first level, made a significant change where, in addition to now having multiple uses per day, it used to be in 2014 you had a use,
right,
and then you got that use back on a short rest or a long rest. We changed it in the previous version that fighters start with 2 per day, and then that number goes up to 4 as they go up to 20th level. But what we've now also done is we've made it so that whenever the fighter finishes a short rest, the fighter gets 1 use back.
So like channel
so
divinity.
really, and this, by the way, is a theme that we started leaning into in UA 6, and we're leaning into even harder in UA 7, is we're ensuring that every class has an incentive to take short rests.
So it's not just the Warlock asking.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's a partial fix. My hope was that we would have a cohesion between the classes where the desire to take long rests and short rests would be roughly equivalent, so that, you know, when you're adventuring with your party and, you know, somebody wants to take a short rest, there's a good chance everybody wants to take a short rest. And what happens now is you have your warlocks, and then you have your, you know, paladins, and the paladin, unless they need to heal, doesn't need the short rest for anything. And then you've got, you know, your warlock gets everything on a short rest. Fighters actually get a lot too on a short rest. And I wanted a more cohesive system, and it sounds like they're kind of doing that in a watered down way by giving something. We'll have to see. Like, are they going to actually do that with every single class, where every single class gets something? Sorcerers are one that don't really get anything on a short rest. Are they going to start getting sorcery points back on a short rest? It would be nice. It would definitely. It's not a solution, but it's kind of halfway there.
It's funny. That is often the characterization, that it's like just the warlock. Actually, every class in our game has something that replenishes on a short rest. But it's absolutely true that the weight that the short rest has for each class is very different.
Okay.
Just as the weight of a long rest is very different for different classes. What's important to us is we want everyone to be glad to take a long rest or a short rest.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see that in UA 7 and in our future UAs, that coming more and more into focus, where everyone has incentive to be happy about taking a short rest or a long rest. And it's interesting, we've even seen some people speculate in the survey questionnaires as well as in online discussions of like the short rest going away.
Right.
And that has never been our plan. We certainly experimented a bit in Tasha's Cauldron with reducing how much classes rely on it. But
I did see some speculation that short rests were going away, and I never prescribed to that. I did think that we were moving towards no features coming back on short rests, and so they would be for expenditure of hit dice only. And I mean, design-wise, they were definitely headed in that direction. And it looks like after Playtest 5, I think, is where they really they just abandoned it.
we never intended to reduce it down to 0. And for the revised PH, we're far more interested in, again, giving everyone incentive to take short rests rather than removing people's reliance on it.
Right.
It's sort of us finding where the sweet spot is, which is why we've experimented with like turning the volume way down, now turning it up, and we now feel like, all right, I think we found the point that feels right, not only in our extensive internal playtesting, but also then in the survey feed.
So the Channel Divinity feature, basically you get multiple uses and then you get one back on a short rest. Sounds like Second Wind will be the same thing. And they had previously gone where just about everything was proficiency bonus times per long rest, proficiency bonus times per long rest. I gotta say, the multiple uses with one back on a short rest, I like it better than once per short rest, and I probably like it better than proficiency bonus times per long rest as well. It's not a bad compromise at all.
Back that we receive. So you're going to see that not only here in the fighter, but elsewhere in this, especially with warlocks returning to using pact magic. The fighter has a number of quality of life improvements and also lifting of restrictions. So we experimented in the previous version with Action Surge having a very contained list of actions that you could take.
Yeah.
This time, we're instead lifting all those restrictions except one, and that is saying Action Surge cannot be used for the magic action. Because
I mean, that was he just gave me a moment of dread there. I'm like, no, no more wizards taking Action Surge for multiple spells, but it sounds like they're keeping that restriction. Please keep that restriction.
Ultimately, that is the only action that we're really trying to exclude here.
Yeah.
Because Action Surge was never meant to be where you go to cast more spells or use magic items more times.
I have abused this many times, so I know some folks are going to be sad about this, but I cast Eldritch Blast way more often than I should have. There are things I've done that were not as intended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, we'll see what people think. The feedback we got last time was that people acknowledged that there needed to be some kind of limitation,
right,
but felt that in the last iteration we went a little too far with limitations. So this time what we're experimenting with is we'll just limit the thing that we actually care about. Because the other stuff, we limited those other things largely.
My prediction is that people will be fine with Action Surge not being allowed to use the magic action. Let me know below if you think otherwise, but I suspect people are going to be okay with that.
For thematic reasons.
Right.
But people rightly pointed out that it's fun having a number of options for role-playing reasons, unusual tactical situations, and whatnot. And so rather than trying to enforce a theme here, we decided, let's just limit the one that is the concern.
Yeah, makes sense.
The fighter has a couple of brand new features this time around. Right at second level, you get a brand new feature called Tactical Mind. And one of the things we have been doing throughout this playtest is looking for ways to give classes that had very little non-combat utility some way to contribute more outside combat.
Yeah.
We already did that in the Barbarian with Primal Knowledge. We've done it in the Ranger. We've done it in different ways in our other classes. Well, this time around, it's the fighter's turn. And so we've introduced this new feature called Tactical Mind that really is all about the fact that fighters are tacticians.
Yeah.
They are all about mastering battlefields. And so what we've let you now do is that you have the option of expending uses of Second Wind to give yourself a D10 that you can roll to add to ability checks that you make. So this would be rather than regaining hit points. And this, of course, would be very situational, but we want fighters who not only are able to tap into their stamina for physical purposes, and that's what Second Wind represents, but Tactical Mind represents they also have a well of mental stamina.
Yeah.
And there are always sessions in most campaigns, occasionally that occur, where there's no combat. And in a session like that, we want a fighter to still have reason to use Second Wind, one of their main resources, and now they have a use for it. They might even want to use it in a fight. Like sometimes we've all been in those set piece encounters where often the most important thing is not what you're doing to the monsters, but what you're doing to the MacGuffin on the magic altar. And a fighter might find that the clutch move is to actually use tactical mind to ensure they succeed on that critical ability check.
I mean, if you can just add a D10 to an ability check using your Second Wind, what I could see fighters doing is adding it to their initiative. So we'll have to see if the mechanics allow for that.
Nice.
So then the other brand new feature is at level 5. It's called Tactical Shift. Also plays into Second Wind. And what it allows you to do is whenever you activate your Second Wind as a bonus action, you can move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. This is the fighter realizing not only do I need to get some of my hit points back,
Right.
maybe I should get out of danger, or maybe I should move over there to protect my friend, or maybe I should move over here where I'm in a more advantageous position to fire my bow at that person. Again, leaning into this notion of the fighter as the tactical master, and also us exploring, giving the fighter some more active things to do with their class features, which is also the motivation behind the weapon mastery system, is give the fighter and the barbarian and other weapon-focused characters fun, active things to do on their turns. We also, at level 13, have yet another brand new feature in the fighter called Studied Attacks. And this represents this tactical master studying their opponent. And how we represent that is if the fighter makes an attack roll against someone and misses, they have advantage on their next attack roll against that same target. So it's essentially, I thrust and I missed, but I saw how you dodged it. Mm-hmm. So on my next attack, I have a greater chance of hitting you. Really, again, going into this theme of fighters being the master of the battlefield. And then we've got the subclasses.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
All right, so the fighter sounds like all buffs, and no nerfs that he mentioned. I of course will be very curious to verify that the high level saving throw stuff is still there, because I was a fan of that, but he didn't mention it, so I'm assuming it's still there. But it sounds like weapon mastery, tiny buff, and that's a surprise. I thought it was going to get a bigger buff. I think the common assumption was you'd be able to use 2 weapon masteries at the same time. Doesn't sound like that's happening. Instead, you're just going to get the ability to switch masteries on more weapons. Looks like some of the restrictions that had been applied to Action Surge have been removed, but the important one is still there. And then we're going to get a couple other smaller abilities and other ways to use Second Wind for movement or ability checks. So a bunch of little bonuses and little buffs. Nothing that sounded overly powerful to me. And the 13th level ability, if you miss, you get advantage on the next attack. I mean, that's nice, but advantage in the playtest, at least so far, has been relatively easy to attain.
Okay.
We've been doing a lot.
I'm very aware. What's the first fighter on the agenda?
So we have the Battle Master. The Battle Master has long been one of the most popular subclasses for the fighter. We have seen some...
I think if the Battle Master had not been included in the new player's handbook, there would have been a riot.
Requests for the Battle Master to be dismantled and its maneuvers given to the base class.
Yeah.
That is something we explored early on in our work for the 2024 Player's Handbook. We ended up not going in that direction and instead introducing weapon mastery for a number of reasons, but the 2 main ones that I'll talk about right now is, first off, people love this subclass.
Yeah.
What we did not want to do is just eliminate it for the sake of all the other subclasses.
Right.
Also, The Battle Master represents a style of play, having this pool of dice that you keep track of to spend on a variety of different micro effects that
Yeah, he's going to say not all players want to play that way, and he's right.
it's just simply not for everybody who is attracted to being a fighter.
Right. Yeah.
Because we know from nearly a decade now of going through player feedback, there are many people who love playing fighters who have no interest in what the Battle Master does. So we decided we're going to let the Battle Master keep being the Battle Master and just enhance other subclasses and the base class in ways that are appropriate.
This plus weapon mastery must be particularly nasty now in terms of like tactical options.
So yeah, the Battle Master, I mean, it's in the name.
Yeah.
They're a master of battle. I mean, they're already in the class that is the tactical master, the master of the battlefield. So you can almost think of the Battle Master as that plus one.
Yeah.
And here we have mostly made some quality of life improvements, like Student of War now also gives you a proficiency in a skill. We've made Know Your Enemy way easier to use, and we think more reliably useful.
Right.
Because it was a neat thematic ability previously, but not always that useful, and also not easy to use in battle. And now it is. Now Know Your Enemy is a bonus action, rather than needing to study someone
perfect.
for
Yeah.
a long time outside of combat.
That's great.
You also, now with Relentless in this subclass, once you reach 15th level, you now, once per turn, can use a maneuver without expending a superiority die.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's nice.
So that will help.
I mean, College of Swords bards who have flourishes eventually got a feature where they could just use a d6 and not use their bardic inspiration. And I always figured that the Battle Master should have something equivalent to that, because the Battle Master and the College of Swords are similar thematically.
Extend the life of your
Or
superiority
similar
die
mechanically,
pool.
I should say.
We have also, and this is a common theme when we get to collections of smaller mechanics. We did this in Meta Magic. We've done this in Eldritch Invocations. We have now revisited every one of the maneuver options, and a number of them have gotten tweaks, in most cases, to make them easier or more fun to use. I encourage people to go to the design note to see all of the details. Yes.
There's a lot to play with, a lot of combos to like come up with.
And also, an important thing to note here is we've also imported some of the maneuver options that we introduced in Tasha's Cauldron.
Yeah.
Because people, the last time we did the fighter in the playtest, even though the Battle Master wasn't in the playtest, we were already getting requests for us to import some of those maneuvers from Tasha's.
Yeah.
So here they are. The Brawler, new subclass. We've chatted about it. This is the badass who is going to beat that monster with a chicken wing or whatever it is to hand.
That is a thing that, is just it's very in popular culture. Someone who kind of like those Bane characters who they are lethal all the time. They don't need any particular thing in their hands, and they're not necessarily the monk. They are just someone who everything is a weapon.
And in some ways, you can almost think of the Brawler as the antithesis of the Battle Master.
Right.
The Battle Master is this studied, tactical fighter who can bolster allies, carefully use these maneuvers, manage this pool of dice.
Yeah.
Whereas the Brawler is just the messy, dirty fighter
Yeah.
of
Which everyone loves.
This rock
Yeah.
is what I'm using now in this fight. And we just felt that archetype was missing from the fighter, and so we're excited to offer it here. The Champion returns, and the Champion has several tweaks based on the previous version. The previous version was well received. We were super happy to see that a subclass that has sometimes struggled to reach a high satisfaction score finally did. And we have brought back Remarkable Athlete. We saw people requesting that, and we've made it a little clearer on its functionality. What I mean by that is clever players who read it carefully realized that it benefited their initiative rolls. We did not want that to continue to be this thing that only master players figured out. So we've now made it so that Remarkable Athlete just straight up tells you, rather than getting a set bonus, you now have you have advantage on initiative rolls and you have advantage on strength athletics checks. And you also get your long jump distance increased. So we wanted it to be, put it on the tin, what this feature does.
Right.
So that's probably a good thing. I agree with him that it shouldn't be something that you need to really study to figure out what it does or how it affects something like initiative. So just giving advantage on initiative, I think, is a perfectly acceptable rework of that to make it a little more user-friendly.
Whereas before, when you did a quick read, it wasn't always clear in the 2014 version, what is this for? Other than the very obvious, my jump distance increases.
Yeah.
We also have improved the new feature that we introduced last time, Heroic Warrior, and have now made it so that you can give yourself heroic advantage at the start of every one of your turns that you start without it. Yeah. Meaning, you can give yourself advantage to use.
That's really good. I mean, that's just really, really good.
Use once on each of your turns. This is meant to work with their expanded crit range.
Yeah, you have even more of that chance.
Exactly. The Eldritch Knight is here. So for everyone who loves the classic warrior mage archetype, we've got you covered. And the main changes here is...
What I want to know is, did they remove the restrictions on the spell schools you can access? Because I think they should.
Is after level 3, we have lifted the spell school restriction that Eldritch Knights had on some of their spell selection. So you'll have more flexibility now.
Nice.
We've also clarified that you can use an arcane focus when you're casting your spells. And then we've tweaked how both War Magic and also improved War Magic function.
Okay.
So we've now made it so that you can keep, as a fighter, taking the attack action on your turn, and you can now replace one of your attacks with a cantrip.
Great.
Yeah.
It used to be kind of the other way around, where if you use...
So the way it used to be is you used your action to cast the cantrip, and then you could make an attack as a bonus action with your weapon. And once, the Blade Singer came around, that just kind of made that obsolete, I guess. So here, they're essentially importing the Blade Singer's extra attack into the Eldritch Knight, where it should have it. That makes perfect sense.
Use your action to cast a spell, you could make an attack as a bonus action.
Yeah.
What we found is that caused the Eldritch Knight's average damage to, in most cases, be lower than the typical fighter. The fighter and the Barbarian, on average, over the life of a campaign, will on average deal more damage than members of most other classes. Other classes have higher peaks.
Yeah.
Other classes will have moments of damage that exceed the fighter and the Barbarian, but they are the Energizer bunnies. They're the ones
consistently
who
dealing.
consistent deal a reliable amount of damage. But that was undermined in the Eldritch Knight by having essentially this encouragement for the Eldritch Knight to cast a spell instead of taking the attack action. And this was rough for a class where one of their main features is they get more attacks than anybody else.
Yeah.
So we've now fixed that in the Eldritch Knight so that now it's instead the other way around. Keep taking that attack action, but you can now replace one of those attacks with a cantrip. And then when you get improved War Magic, you also have the option of replacing 2 of your attacks. And remember, when a fighter gets high enough level, they have 4 attacks.
Yeah.
You can replace 2 of them to cast a level 1 or level 2 spell.
Nice.
So I think this is...
I don't know if that's all that great. I'm just thinking in my head, level 1 and level 2 spells. Are any of them worth 2 attacks from your fighter? Nothing's coming to mind off the top of my head.
Going to make it so that the Eldritch Knight can way better fulfill that fantasy of being a potent warrior mage.
Nice. I am excited to talk about the Sorcerer. I am a giant fan of wild magic, but I will put that aside. What's changed?
So, since the last time that people saw this class, we have taken some of those class-specific spells that we experimented with, and we've turned them either into non-spell features or into spells on the Sorcerer spell list, and then evolved them a bit. So an example of that, Innate Sorcery is a first level feature now that allows you to enter almost like a arcane rage, where for 1 minute after you activate it, the spell save DC of your sorcerer spells increases by 1, and you have advantage on the attack rolls of your sorcerer spells.
Nice.
This then is an ability that gets enhanced by several later features. We are continuing to explore this notion of this boiling magic inside the sorcerer and giving it expression in game mechanics. And Innate Sorcery, I think, is a really fun way of expressing that.
Yeah.
In a way that the sorcerer getting to decide, I'm going to open the funnel wider, in terms of letting the energy out. And so examples of how this feature gets enhanced at higher levels, eventually it gets to the point where when it's on, the sorcerer can use 2 meta magics per spell instead of only 1. And then its sort of ultimate form is you then get a meta magic on your castings that costs you no sorcery points. And that is something that will also help extend the life of your sorcery point pool, nice. Which we know is often a pain point for sorcerers. Yeah. Now, resource management is something that is a part of every class in our game. So that is something that we won't get rid of, but we are mindful of where is it painful rather than fun and interesting. We want it to be fun and interesting, not painful. And so speaking of shepherding your sorcery points, we have taken the Sorceress Restoration feature from level 15 and brought it all the way down to level 5.
Oh, wow.
And this now gives you a certain number of sorcery points back whenever you roll initiative and have none remaining.
Boo!
Yeah.
And
boo! Just give us sorcery points back.
And this will then scale up because
I was just waiting for him to say whenever you have no sorcery points remaining. No, just give them sorcery points back when they roll initiative.
It's based on your sorcerer level, and it starts as you just get 1 back if you roll initiative and have none remaining, and then it will go up to the 4 that it was before. So we decided rather than making you wait until almost the end of your career to have this function, we now give you the function way earlier, and then it will scale up with you. And people are going to see in our next version of the Monk, for instance, people are going to see similar tech there, where we're already going through feedback on UA6 for the survey, and we were working on this Unearthed Arcana while people were surveying for that, and we were already improving a number of these sort of point management systems here. Yeah. And so the Monk will get to benefit from that when the Monk gets its second version.
And it's also going to be coming back if we're out of key points or discipline points. Come on, just give. Why do you have to expand everything to get anything back?
Some further tweaks in the meta magic options. Not many though, because overall people loved what we did with meta magic last time. The main thing that we have changed here is we have yet another version of Twin Spell.
Yeah.
Twin Spell was actually the only meta magic option that didn't score well last time around. And so we have another version here. This time around, because people were really hungry for having that sort of second target option back.
Yeah.
But as I explained in another video, we cannot do it the way it was done in 2014 because
Right.
that version, just the math of it was way off. It cost far too few sorcery points. And then if we were able to make it cost the appropriate number of sorcery points,
Prohibitive.
you wouldn't even be able to use the feature until you were near the end of your career.
Right.
Also, the old Twin Spell had the problem of requiring a lot of complexity in terms of figuring out which spells it actually worked with.
Right.
So we are committed to, we are not bringing back the overpowered version that would have to become prohibitively expensive if we kept it. We are also not bringing back that complexity. But we hear people about wanting to be able to cast a spell that normally targets one person and now they want to make it target two.
Right.
So this time around, what we're doing is we're making it so that Twin Spell can modify spells like Charm Person and Hold Person, where currently, if you read the spell and you go down and look at the at higher level section.
All right, so that's what they're doing. So it's going to be treated as one level higher if the upcasting allows targeting a second creature, it sounds like. That sounds pretty cool. I'm okay with that.
And it will tell you if you cast this spell with a higher level spell slot, you can target an additional person.
Yeah.
Twin Spell now functions with those spells and spells like them, where what it lets you do is essentially up-level the spell to get that additional target and do that up-leveling for a very modest sorcery point cost. And so basically we're bringing back the multi-targeting and it is now limited to the spells that we have designed to actually step-by-step increase the number of targets.
Right.
And
this sounds like a pretty good solution to me. I think the community will be reasonably positive about this change. Now, he says modest sorcery point cost. We'll have to see what that is. But assuming it is a modest sorcery cost, I think players can get behind this particular fix.
now you can do it at a much lower cost than spending a higher level spell slot. The other good news here is as we revise the spells in the game, quite a few spells that did not have an at higher level section in 2014 will now have such a section in 2024. People can see that in this UA in the jump spell, where the jump spell did not have an at higher levels before. It now does. And its at higher levels is exactly this kind, where if you cast it with a higher level slot, you can target more people.
It's also something I keep in mind when I'm playing a Warlock as well, is like, okay, well, am I getting the most, personally out of this? Since I'm like having to cast it at the highest I can, like, does it make sense for me to use that on a spell that does not scale?
And so now the Sorcerer can use Twin Spell with this new version.
Todd actually makes a really good point here. So switching from Sorcerers to Warlocks, about how if you are selecting Warlock spells and you're automatically upcasting, let's say to 5th level, so you're 9th level Warlock or something like that, then there's all these spells from 1st through 4th level that might be good spells to cast at their level, but they feel bad to cast with a 5th level spell. I almost think that the Warlock spell list should be entirely spells that upcast. Just a thought. Except maybe they're 5th level spells.
To get that extra target and not have to spend the next higher level spell slot to do so.
And then you're erasing the concentration issue as well. Like for whole person's concentration. So
correct. And that's the other thing that we are comfortable bringing back in is people noted that the version that we playtested before no longer allowed you to essentially feel like you were concentrating on 2 spells at once.
Yeah.
Not something we're comfortable giving out too freely.
Yeah.
Whereas in this new version of the twin spell, because it's enhancing spells that are already designed to up level into having multiple targets,
Gotcha.
you are now concentrating on just 1 spell with multiple targets.
Gotcha.
So it solves a number of issues.
Nice.
Draconic Sorcery is back. And probably the main change here is the wings are back to being on all the time.
Yep. Yeah.
And we have also brought back Draconic Presence.
And so we're all waiting to see, does he talk about how Draconic Wings were a different level in the previous Unearthed Arcana or not? Because he's made that mistake twice now in previous videos. So we're all waited with bated breath to see if it is a 3rd time.
And we've made it now a bonus action, and it no longer requires concentration.
Nice.
So Draconic Presence is going to be easier to use and less painful to use.
Right.
Wild Magic Sorcery is
Here we go.
also here. And the main request we've gotten
I'm glad to see Wild Magic Sorcery come back. I am.
over the years is to make it more...
Here's Wild Magic Sorcery in a nutshell. If you have an uncooperative DM, it blows because you spend your Tides of Chaos, and a long rest later, you get Tides of Chaos back. If you have a supportive DM, Wild Magic Sorcery is a riot because every time you use Tides of Chaos, when you cast a leveled spell afterwards, they recharge your Tides of Chaos, and then you automatically roll on the Wild Magic table. Because I've gone through campaigns where Wild Magic Sorcerer has never rolled on the table. And then I've been in one-shots where Wild Magic Sorcerers are rolling on the table like every single time they cast a spell. So, I mean, at my tables, my players just know that if they cast a leveled spell and their Tides of Chaos is expended, they just got it back.
reliable for the wild sorcerer to actually get to interact with their big wonky table of fun effects.
Yeah, the core of what makes them fun, and not having to ask your dungeon master all the time.
Exactly. So we listened and we have delivered. And now, immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell of level 1 or higher, you can roll on the Wild Magic Surge table.
Yeah.
Yes.
Full stop. You can just do it.
There it is.
I feel like there's more just friend pressure from me. Yeah, I love chaos. Yeah.
But
Yes.
once you do this,
Yeah.
you then can't do it again until you finish a long rest.
Boo! Oh, boo! What is that presentation where he says you can just do it? Well, unless you've done it before, then you can't do it again. Oh, don't say it like that.
However, we have built in, and I know you know this because you read the revised subclass.
Yeah.
We have built in ways for you to get that ability back.
Yeah.
Tides of Chaos has it, and
Now, is Tides of Chaos still the DM's prerogative? Because in the 2014 Player's Handbook, here's how Tides of Chaos goes. So you can get advantage on a check. And it can be an ability check, it can be an attack roll, it can be a saving throw, whatever. But you spend your Tides of Chaos, you get advantage. And then it says, if the DM chooses to, next time you cast a leveled spell, you can recover your Tides of Chaos and you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table automatically. And the thing that sucks about that, of course, I just mentioned, it depends on your DM. I would love to have the DM's choice being taken right out of that, just have it automatic for the player, even if it's limited times per day. If you can use Tides of Chaos once and then the next time you cast a spell, it's on the Wild Magic Surge table automatically, that would be fine. I'm glad. This is kind of a roller coaster, this one, because first it's, you can cast on the Wild Magic Surge table if you want to, and then it's like, actually, only once per long rest. Well, actually, more than once per long rest. So this is quite the wild ride.
so there's going to be this fun mini game of, all right, I tapped into the wild magic,
Yes.
and now I want to use Tides of Chaos, so then I can tap into it again. and I think it's going to be
Sounds
a ton
like
of
that's
fun.
what it is.
Bend Luck is now a D6 instead of a D4.
Right.
And now Wild Bombardment lets you interact with the Wild Magic table even more. And Wild Bombardment is the new name of Spell Bombardment.
Right.
As far as the table goes, you'll notice it is not in the UA because we're using the table that's in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So
Nice.
if you're playtesting this version of the subclass, you've got that massive table right there in your book. These are the only two subclasses in this UA. As we note within it,
I am surprised they're not changing the table. Now, whether the table will change in the 2024 Player's Handbook is another question entirely. But I thought for sure if they were going to do Wild Magic, it would be a new table.
the other two subclasses that are on the docket to appear in the 2024 PH for the Sorcerer are Aberrant Sorcery,
Yeah.
formerly known as Aberrant Mind, and Clockwork Sorcery.
No kidding. Okay. So I did not expect either of those subclasses to make the Player's Handbook 2024. They're both very strong. They're the two strongest Sorcerer subclasses. I thought... Did you not think Divine Soul would get in? I thought it would. And Shadow. I thought Divine Soul and Shadow. But anyway, yeah, Aberrant Mind and Clockwork. They probably won't be making many changes to them.
Formerly known as the Clockwork Soul. And what we ask you to do here is if you want to play test those subclasses with this version of the Sorcerer,
Just use Tasha's.
you can use the versions that are in Tasha's Cauldron.
Yeah.
Those subclasses are recent enough in our design that we don't currently have any significant changes for them.
Yeah. Let's go into the Warlock, the non-controversial Warlock.
I think this version of the Warlock,
I gotta say, I'm gonna miss. I play tested UA5's Warlock. I know people said it sucked. I play tested it multiple times, and it worked just fine. It really did. I did not feel weak. I was casting good spells. Yes, it's a bit of a clunker to go into Mystic Arcanum and then have to select your spells over and over again, using up your invocation slots. But in actual play, I did quite well. So I'm going to miss the old Warlock. I wish they had just tweaked it and fixed it rather than just reverting.
Warlock is delightful. After our experiment of not having Pack Magic,
Yeah.
Pack Magic is back in this version of the Warlock. And we saw in the playtest feedback how much people really want this feature to stay in the class. So the playtest did its job, which was to answer that question: how important was it? But we still have our goal, which was, and for anyone who saw our videos about the last version of the Warlock,
Right.
I talked about the fact one of our main reasons for experimenting with replacing Pack Magic was to let the Warlock cast their spells more often.
Yeah.
Pack Magic.
So it sounds like Pack Magic may not come back exactly the same. So this is very interesting.
Because of how it works, of the spells all going up to the Warlock's highest slot level, it's really constrained in terms of the Warlock's spell list. It's also constrained in terms of number of slots. But again, we also know that people are like, but can we cast our spells a few more times?
Yeah.
So in answer to that, and to accompany the return of Pack Magic, we have introduced a new feature at level 2 called Magical Cunning. And Magical Cunning lets a Warlock perform a 1-minute ritual to then regain a certain number of their Pack Magic spell slots.
Nice.
They can do this only once per day,
Yeah.
but this is a big deal because what this means is that
This is the smallest surprise there ever was when we saw the monk in playtest 6, and then he started hinting that they were going to find new ways for the Warlock to recover more pack slots. The monk had that 1 minute to get the short rest, and then so they can get their discipline points back, and we're like, They're going to do the same thing for the Warlock. Sounds like that's exactly what's happening, though at a different level. The Monk, of course, has to wait to level 6, because screw you, Monks. The Warlock's going to get it at level 2.
In addition to being able to get their spell slots back on short rests and long rests, they also have this ability that they can do now once per day at low level.
And that's not a nice thematic thing as well, of being able to, use Warlocks in my head, there's always a ritual happening. There's always like candles and creepy stuff. So having that a little bit, take a minute and like do something creepy and then get a spell slot back. It's always going to be creepy, yeah.
And this is similar to something we did in the Sorcerer, where we took a very high level feature that gave you your core resource back and gave you a low level version of it. So here, how we did that is Magical Cunning is basically a low level version of Eldritch Master.
Yeah.
And so the new version of Eldritch Master that is now back in the Warlock now builds on Magical Cunning, because we essentially give you a little mini Eldritch Master early, and then you blossom into it later in your career. And again, people will see in the next version of the Monk similar kind of approach of bringing some of that resource restoration lower level, and then have it bloom into the fuller version that people are accustomed to. Other things that are big in the Warlock is Mystic Arcanum is back in the base class, and the Contact Patron feature that we introduced last time is here to stay. People really like it, but it's at a lower level than it was last time. Otherwise, the base Warlock class right now looks very similar to the 2014 Warlock. Where the main changes are, other than Contact Patron being here and Magical Cunning being a new feature at
So, not a big surprise. They basically just reverted to the 2014 Warlock, except one minute, and you're going to be able to get your spell slots back, or a spell slot back, likely, and then maybe scaling to more spell slots at higher levels, and once per long rest, I assume.
Level is we have taken the Pact Boons feature and absorbed it into Eldritch Invocations.
Okay.
In contrast, Mystic Arcanum is back to being a core feature and not a part of Eldritch Invocations.
Gotcha.
People correctly pointed out that having Mystic Arcanum inside the Eldritch Invocations subsystem made it so that people...
So what he's saying is Pact of the Blade, Tome, and Chain are going to be invocations now? Is that what he's saying?
Felt like they had to spend a lot of their Eldritch Invocation options on Mystic Arcanum. So we pulled Mystic Arcanum back outside Eldritch Invocations, but we put Pact Boons into the Eldritch Invocations pool. Here's the reason we did this. We want you to be able to have more than one. We actually, for a long time, have felt that Pact of the Blade and Pact of the Tome are really the starting choices. Pact of the Chain and then Pact of the Talisman and Tasha's Cauldron are really add-on boons and are not meant to have the same function for your character. Pact of the Blade and Pact of the Tome are really about your Warlock's sort of core combat style.
Yeah.
Are you more about a weapon, or are you more about spellcasting? Even though all Warlocks are spellcasters.
Yeah.
It's not a kind of either or thing. It's really just
where are you leaning?
Where are you leaning?
Yeah.
And when we were looking at the feedback and seeing people rightly pointing out, Pact of the Chain, for instance, has a very different power profile for a Warlock, and people were requesting or musing about that becoming as spicy as Blade and Tome. And we realized, well, it's never been meant to be as spicy as those two. And then the deeper we thought about it, we realized, and we don't want you picking one of those two, blocking you from having an enhanced familiar.
Right.
And this one thing led to another, and we realized these are Eldritch Invocations. And we're actually okay with you having more than one of them. This means at higher level, if you chose Pact of the Blade or Pact of the Tome at first level, and remember, these used to be available only at third level.
Yeah.
So now you get to pick one of these two at first level.
Okay. That's just what I was going to ask. So it sounds like you're going to pick just between Blade and Tome, and then Chain and Talisman are going to be the invocations. Is that, and so am I to understand you can't be both a Pact of the Blade and Tome, even if like there's no going to be no invocation for those? I guess we'll see.
You could then pick the other one later.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can. Okay.
This is going to make Warlocks even more customizable than they were before. Because of us moving these options into the invocations pool and people always wanting more invocations, we have now increased the invocation cap again, and it now goes all the way up to 10
Nice.
at 20th level. Well, actually, you hit 10 at 18th level. And speaking of invocations, there are a lot of revisions to individual invocations based on the feedback that we got.
The invocation list in UA5 was one problem with that design, was that the invocations just, they weren't up to snuff. Some of them were really good. There were 9th level ones for the various pacts that were generally pretty good. Eldritch Mind was probably too good. And then, or not Eldritch Mind, the one where you touch somebody and you see through their senses and then you can cast spells through them. The name escapes me at the moment. And then most of them were really bad. So some rebalancing was definitely required.
You're going to see many invocations have lower level prereqs, and not just in some cases 1 or 2 levels lower. Like Master of Myriad Forms went from requiring you to be a level 15 Warlock to being a level 5 Warlock.
Nice.
And so there are a lot of things that are going to come online way earlier than they did for the Warlock before. We have also made a number of enhancements to Pact of the Blade, because as much as people liked some of what we did last time, they pointed out it still needs some oomph to compete with Pact of the Tome.
Yeah.
Well, what the real issue was, Pact of the Blade is just not better than Eldritch Blast plus Agonizing Blast. And they didn't get Weapon Mastery. I was asked, why would you ever use your weapon if you're a Pact of the Blade Warlock rather than just use Eldritch Blast? And the only answer I really had was, you're stuck in melee. That might be a reason. But beyond that, there really wasn't a reason.
And so there now are enhancements not only in Pact of the Blade, but we also have brought Thirsting Blade back, and it also has an improvement inside it. And so you now have some damage boosts and also number of attack boosts in Pact of the Blade. And then in some of the Eldritch Invocations, should you decide to lean even harder into that direction,
That's good to see.
that will make it so that you can really feel like an effective...
Like, I don't think a Warlock needs to be a weapon user, but if you want to do that, like, it's kind of advertised as part of the class, is that if you want to, you can be this weapon using Warlock. And if you go down that route, then it should be the best thing you can do.
weapon user. Or, remember, since now you can dabble, you might be a Pact of the Tome, primarily a Pact of the Tome Warlock, but like, but I also like the ability to pull out, to summon up this spectral weapon and whack somebody with it. So I'm going to have a little bit of that fun too.
Yeah.
And so you can mix and match. And
am I correct in the fact that the Elder's Smite is back?
Yes. We have also imported some more invocations from Tasha's Cauldron and Xanathar's Guide. Eldritch Smite was an invocation we introduced in Xanathar's Guide, and we want to move it to the Player's Handbook. I encourage people to dive into the long design note for the Eldritch invocations because there are many tweaks there, both big and small.
Perfect.
When it comes to Warlock subclasses, the Fiend is back with several tweaks. Overall, this subclass was really loved in the previous playtest. So we saw that and we're like, all right, we're going to keep the shape of it and just make some improvements. And that includes some clarifications to Hurl Through Hell, as well as there's now a saving throw at the front end rather than the back, because people correctly pointed out.
Oh, no. Oh, is Hurl Through Hell going to now have a saving throw? No.
Out that it was far too easy to just send anybody
yes,
hurling
yes, that
through
was the point.
The lower
That's
plane.
always been the point. The 2014 Fiend Pact Warlock has a 10th level feature called Hurl Through Hell, where you just pick a creature and boom, it's gone. Right? No save. And then it's like Maze, except you can't even be counterspelled. But they're only gone for a round, then they take some damage. And they come back. In the newer version, the Unearthed Arcana 5 version, they got a save versus the damage, but the disappearing was still automatic. They're going back on that. That's awful. That is, wow. That sucks.
Planes.
Yeah.
And so we have addressed that. We've also made it now, we've reduced the damage of Hurl Through Hell a little bit. So that we could also apply the incapacitated condition to the person being hurled through hell. Because it was actually
But it's going to be save or suck. Save or suck feature, when it used to be automatic. You just suck. Oh, I'm going to miss Hurl Through Hell.
Easy for certain creatures to bypass this with certain abilities, like, for instance, the ability to plane shift or, just poof, right out of it.
Yeah.
So we've decided we actually don't want people doing things while they're hurtling through the lower planes, so they're now incapacitated.
We have the Feywild, and this is a very Misty Step teleporter.
Okay, so yes, the Archfey Patron.
Yeah.
The Archfey Patron, its features, other than Misty Escape in 2014, were all low scoring when we did our big Player's Handbook survey in 2021. All of them were in the 60s, other than Misty Escape. What that told us is we need to take a whack at redesigning this subclass, but keep that one feature people really liked.
Yeah.
And so what you're now going to see here is us really leaning into two of the main Fey themes in D&D for characters and monsters, and that is the charm condition and teleportation. And that teleportation appears in a big way right at level 3, where you always have Misty Step prepared. You can cast it a certain number of times per day without using spell slots.
Okay, I'm still feeling the pain from Hurl Through Hell. I just had my own Hurl Through Hell, but Archfey, if you watch this channel, you know I love my teleportation abilities. So it sounds like Archfey is getting the Archfey features other than Misty Escape really aren't very good. So it sounds right away like I'm gonna like this subclass a whole lot more.
And you have some add-on effects that you can apply
like
to
the
this
Eladrin.
teleportation.
Yeah.
This is similar thematically to what we did with Eladrin, the playable species. And that similarity is intentional, because this is the Warlock who is tapping into the same Fey magic as Eladrin. But it's a different mechanism here. This is built on you specifically casting the Misty Step spell, and we modify it over time. So now Misty Escape lets you cast Misty Step as a reaction in response to taking damage, and also gives you a couple more effects that you have the option of applying. And you can apply just one each time you cast Misty Step. But when you get to level 6, you will now have 4 options, a little menu of 4 that you can choose from each time you cast Misty Step.
That's nice.
To add on an additional effect.
It's gonna be fun.
Yes.
I want to get into a fight immediately.
We also now then...
One thing that's nice about Misty Step when we're talking about a Warlock specifically is, so if you cast Misty Step and you're a wizard or a sorcerer, because you cast a spell as a bonus action, it means any other spell you cast on your turn can only be a cantrip. And I mean, the cantrips aren't that great, right? But with Warlock, of course, Eldritch Blast is a cantrip, and Eldritch Blast is pretty good. So Misty Step plus Eldritch Blast is a pretty nice combination.
We have at level 10 Beguiling Defenses. You're immune to the charm condition, just as you were in 2014. But now also we've made it so that if someone has the cheek to hit you with an attack roll, you can essentially beguile them into taking some of that damage themselves, which is a very Fae thing to do. And then finally, we have a new feature at level 14 where it allows you, every time you cast an enchantment spell or an illusion spell using a spell slot, you can also cast Misty Step as a part of the same action that you used to cast
That's pretty cool.
that other spell, and you can do so without expending a spell slot.
It's fantastic.
And to interact with this feature, most of the spells on your patron spell list are enchantments and illusions.
Yeah.
And so you are going to be just
everywhere.
Mist all over. Really, our effort here is to give the Archfey a distinctive play style that really sets it apart from the other Warlock subclasses.
This sounds really good. Archfey sounds really good.
That with Eldritch Blast and being able to push and pull people around with those invocations is going to be a very interesting combat technician, potentially.
Yes. In the Warlock, we also have the Celestial Patron.
Yes.
And the Celestial, the last time we saw them was in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And they are now here just with a few minor tweaks.
I don't see a lot of Celestial Patron Warlocks myself. Everyone seems to be Genie, Fiend, Hexblade, occasionally the Fathomless, and that is mostly what I see with Warlocks.
They are here with an improved Patron Spells feature, where they now have all these spells prepared. And then Celestial Resilience now interacts with the new Magical Cunning feature.
Very nice.
Now, the Great Old One subclass, it has more tweaks than that.
Yeah.
So in addition...
All right, so we have Archfey, Fiend, Celestial, and Great Old One. That means no Hexblade. A lot of people were predicting, I also was predicting, that we'd probably see Hexblade in redesigned here. Does not appear to be the case.
To having the improved Patron Spells feature that all the Warlock subclasses now have, its Awakened Mind feature now gives you a more...
And I'm glad to see Great Old One. I should make that clear because I have a soft spot in my heart for the thematics of Great Old One. The idea that, you know, you're essentially a Cthulhu worshiper, or a pact with like a Cthulhu or another being like Cthulhu, which I've always kind of liked.
Or useful telepathy. The 2014 version was this one-way communication. We've now made it so that you can create two-way communication with a single creature. And then we've, at level 6, made it so that you have a feature that plays on this, where you can then use...
Weaponized it.
Yes, you can weaponize your telepathic communication with
cool.
somebody, because we want to really dig in deeper to this spooky cosmic horror telepathy angle. And so, it got spookier.
Yeah.
And we also gave you a new feature at level 10 called Eldritch Hex, where you get the Hex spell for free and you have enhancements to how you use it. We're doing this partly because the Great Old One honestly needed a damage boost relative to the other subclasses, and Eldritch Hex is the
I will. They're going to redesign the hex spell, or that I don't know if I assume it will be in this Unearthed Arcana. It's got to be worth casting, or this is going to be a useless feature.
is our way, one of our ways of doing that, in addition to Clairvoyant Combatant, which is the feature at level 6. And then at level 14, we have a completely different functionality in Create Thrall, and that is you getting to cast the Summon Aberration spell, which is currently in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but which will appear.
I so wanted to see the Tasha summoning spells ported over to the Player's Handbook in 2024. Hooray! Hopefully it's more than just Summon Aberration. Bring the whole list. I like those spells a lot.
In the 2024 Player's Handbook. In fact, I can spoil now that all the summoning spells from Tasha's will be in the 2024 Player's Handbook.
Fantastic.
I am feeling so much better now. There's been a few things here where it's like, oh, hurl through hell, can't believe it. Oh, recovery, but you gotta have used your whole your resource, and this doesn't change any of that. That's all still pain points for me. But boy, all the summoning spells from Tasha's are going to be in the new Player's Handbook. That is fantastic news. Now the question is, what are they going to do with the current summoning spells in the Player's Handbook? Because they need removal or redesign, and I believe they've committed that nothing's being removed, nothing's changing level, so they must be redesigned.
Anyone who likes conjuring monsters, those were so nice to have.
And we felt, of all of these subclasses, the one that really should be pulling some horror from another realm, it is the great old one,
It's
Warlock.
fair. It's fair. So let's talk about the wizard. We've got the wizard and a couple subclasses.
So the wizard, we heard loud and clear last time that people wanted the return of the wizard's dedicated spell list. And
Spell list aside, here's my main concerns with Unearthed Arcana 5 Wizard. The new spells that they were given had wording that made them broken. I wasn't against the idea of modify spell or create spell, but there was wording within them and ways they were designed that did not work, and were going to cause problems. So those spells either needed removed or completely redesigned, or reworded at least.
And that's one of the reasons all the classes have gone back to using their own spell lists, along with the Warlock going back to pack magic.
Of course, with the wizard having the bigger spell list and the better spell list, it is conceivable they don't necessarily need modify spell and create spell anymore, because they already get a power boost by having the better spell list.
Also assists the bard's identity and a variety of other reasons. It will also clean up some things in the ranger, where we to preserve the ranger's exclusive access to things like Conjure Barrage and Conjure Volley, had to build them in as class features. Since the ranger was sharing a list with the druid, all that stuff can now go away now that we're back to class spell lists. So the wizard, we had fun with some of the spells we introduced last time, like Modify Spell, Create Spell. There was a mix of tremendous excitement about those spells and also a lot of dread at what they could do to certain play environments, concern about, is this eating the sorcerer's metamagic lunch? We saw the feedback and we decided we're going to put those back on the shelf.
Okay, so they're gone.
And so Modify Spell and Create Spell are no longer here. Memorize Spell is still here, but now it is a non-spell feature rather than a spell given to you by a feature. Arcane Recovery has returned to first level to make it easier for wizards to get some spell slots back right away when they start their careers on a short rest. because spell slots are the wizard's bread and butter.
Yeah.
Because the wizard does not have, intentionally, that many other features going on.
Yeah.
The wizard's main feature is they interact with spells more flexibly than anybody else, and also with a list that is longer than anybody else's. Right. Leaning into that, we have imported from Tasha's Cauldron the ability for the wizard to change their cantrips more often than just when they level up. That was called Cantrip Formulas in Tasha's Cauldron. It's now here in the Player's Handbook version of the class. Wizard Spellbook, we experimented with it as its own feature. It's now been folded back into the spellcasting feature. And Academic, that feature has been replaced by a similarly named one called Scholar,
Right.
Which is about giving you expertise in a skill that is wizard appropriate.
Nice.
Given the fact that wizards are the scholarly class.
Yeah, yeah. They should be good at Arcana.
Yes, or whatever scholarly pursuit
Yes.
The wizard has chosen. One of the changes at high level in spell mastery is, one, we've made it so that it's easier for you to change what those spells are, but we have also made it so that those spells can no longer be bonus actions or reactions. We have realized...
So that's going to change pretty much everybody's choices for spell mastery, because the standard picks are shield or what do we got? Silvery barbs, misty step. So yeah, it's going to change everyone's selections.
Not only in our own play, but also reading the playtest feedback, that allowing a high-level wizard to cast shield, for example, at will, it is simply too good.
Yeah.
And that is why people will see that spell mastery is now limited.
Shield is too good. Shield needs redesigned.
To spells that require an action to cast.
Gotcha.
And honestly, that was our original design intent, and we simply didn't think a decade ago to exclude bonus actions and reactions, and now we're like, okay, it's time for us to do it.
Yeah.
In the subclasses, the Evoker, the big change in the Evoker is that Sculpt spells and Potent Cantrip have switched places.
Oh, interesting.
Sculpt spells used to be a level 3 feature, and Potent Cantrip was level 6.
Oh, wow. So that is a surprise. That's a huge surprise, because the Evoker, I'm sure, must have gotten it. I am sure they said it got good feedback, that people were really happy with it. And Sculpt spells being pushed to 6th level is a major nerf. Because Potent Cantrip just isn't nearly as good as Sculpt spells.
The problem was very few spells, when you were a level 3 wizard, actually benefited from Sculpt spells. And at those lower levels, you're especially relying on your cantrips. And so we decided, let's switch this so that the Evoker can really enjoy those potent cantrips.
Except when you are level 5, you don't have your level 6 feature yet. And the level 5 Evoker is going to miss Sculpt spells a huge amount. I'm assuming players are not going to be particularly thrilled about this switch.
At the levels when they would be most valuable, and can start sculpting spells at the level when most of the Evoker's main AoE spells are coming online.
Right.
I mean, from a design perspective, I get it, because Potent Cantrip, by the time you get it, who cares? But at first level, it's something. Or second level, I should say, it's something. So I understand from a design perspective, but yeah, Sculpt spells being pushed back, players I don't think are going to be thrilled.
So I think this is it's one of those things that seems minor, just flipping the level, but I think in play, it will be a significant upgrade to the Evoker's play experience.
Nice.
We also have the Abjurer, the Diviner, and the Illusionist. The Abjurer has several nice tweaks. One of those is you can now, with your Arcane Ward, simply burn a spell slot to replenish your ward's hit points, rather than sort of having to jump through the hoop of casting an appropriate spell to do it.
Yeah.
And instead it can just be, I simply need this thing right now to have more hit points.
Yeah.
And I don't have a spell that I want to cast right now.
Yeah.
And so we have, in a way, cut out that middle step,
Yeah.
which that step is still there if you want it, where casting an abjuration spell restores hit points. We've just now given you another way of restoring those hit points. We have also replaced improved abjuration in the Abjurer with a new feature called Spellbreaker. And what Spellbreaker does is it gives you Dispel Magic prepared all the time, and you can cast it as a bonus action, and you can add your proficiency bonus to the ability check you make inside it.
Nice.
Making you, as it says in the feature name, a Spellbreaker.
Nice.
Which is very much the identity of the Abjurer. The previous improved Abjuration had that add your proficiency bonus to the ability check part. That's the one.
It's not as big a deal as it sounds. Like, you're casting as a bonus action, so you still have your action, but you can't cast a leveled spell with your action because you cast a leveled spell with your bonus action. So, I mean, you can dodge, right? It might be the best thing you can do.
One piece we've preserved, and that's about all it did.
Yeah.
It did that. It added that to Dispel Magic and also to Counterspell, and the few other very rare spells that include an ability check. We decided, let's just give you Dispel Magic and make it awesome.
Yeah.
Also, Counterspell, as people will see in this very Unearthed Arcana, no longer includes an ability check, and so the old improved Abjuration would have had no interaction with that spell.
Gotcha.
Diviner is a...
So, just a prediction, is Counterspell just not going to work on any spell of 4th level or higher?
hugely popular subclass.
Yes.
So we did very little to it.
Or not, I should say not counter spell, because it'll have upcasting. So I assume you'll be able to upcast your counterspell to 4th level, and then it'll automatically still do 4th level or lower. But if you want to counterspell a 9th level spell, do you need to cast counterspell at 9th level? That's I assume that's going to be it.
The main thing we did is we've made it so that the third eye feature is now a bonus action to activate. Having the incapacitated condition no longer shuts it off. And we essentially folded two of the options into one. So you now no longer have to choose between seeing into the ethereal plane and seeing invisible creatures, because we now let you instead just cast See Invisibility without expending a spell slot.
Right.
And that spell does both of those things.
Yeah.
So we really we improved it so the feature is easier to use, and you're not having to kind of choose between two things, when instead we just give you both of them combined in one. Finally, we have the Illusionist, and in the Illusionist, we have made it so that Malleable Illusions is a bonus action instead of an action.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
Easier to alter illusions that you have running. We've made it so that now Illusory Self can be reused by expending a spell slot of level 2 or higher. And then Illusory Reality has simply been clarified a little bit. People pointed out that in the old version it used to say this thing that you make can't deal damage or deal any other harm. And people point out, what does that mean?
Yeah. Like emotional?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is now much clearer. It says, and I'll read it right from the doc, the object can't deal damage or give any conditions.
Perfect.
That now it is clear. So that's the wizard. I will mention real quick, because wizard players will certainly care about it, as will sorcerers, warlocks, and others. We not only have a fun new version of Jump in this UA, but also a new version of Counterspell.
Right.
The The new
So
version
not a lot of
of
spells in
jump
this one.
is a bonus action instead of an action.
So we need an Unearthed Arcana with a whole lot of spells, and I sure hope I gotta think that'll be Unearthed Arcana 8. Because they're going to need a revised monk in Unearthed Arcana 8. But they already have had a revised version of every other class. So they don't necessarily need to have any other classes there. So that really opens up space to go back into feats for revisions and spells to get some spell revisions. So hopefully that'll happen as well. Though I am relieved to hear that every Tasha's summoning spell is going to be in the new player's handbook. That's great.
Nice.
It can be cast at higher levels to affect multiple people, and it is no longer...
Oh, there's one thing I should mention. If they're going to include the Tasha's summoning spells in the new player's handbook, for the template of the summoned creature, give it a challenge rating, please, because you need that for some mechanics.
Reliant on your speed. This is significant because the 2014 version of Jump was a spell that, in addition to you having to spend your whole action on it, had some hidden feel bad in it if you then went and looked at the jump rules.
Yeah.
Because the spell very simply just says your jump distance is tripled. But anyone who knows our jump rules knows that when you jump, you have to spend movement for every foot of your jump. And the jump spell didn't give you any extra speed.
Gotcha.
So while it might have tripled your jump distance, it didn't give you any additional speed to actually make use of all of that distance.
Right.
So you could often, with certain characters, depending on what their strength was, since jumps are based on your strength, get this tripling, but it's like, but I don't have enough movement to even use this extra distance. So we have now given you the ability with this spell to take this sort of fun hop with it, where on each of your turns you can burn 10 feet of movement to jump 30 feet. And you can do that once per turn.
That's
And
cool.
you'll see it has nothing to do with whatever your speed is.
That's good.
The new counter spell has some significant changes in it. And really the heart of the redesign of counterspell is we have now made it so that the spell is mindful of your target. The old counterspell had a really significant issue in it. And that is, it was too closely based on Dispel Magic. Dispel Magic is based on the level of the spell you're trying to dispel. Counterspell did the same thing, where you are trying to dispel a spell, counter a spell, and it's based on that spell's level. Here's the problem. Counterspell isn't dispelling a spell. The whole story, and this even the 2014 version said this, is you are attempting to interrupt a creature casting a spell.
Right.
The creature is the target, not the spell.
Oh, okay.
And one of the huge issues with Counterspell in its 2014 form is it was no harder to counter a Archlich than it was a 6th level wizard. And we needed to correct that. Because it really needed to account for the might of the spellcaster. And so with that in mind, Counterspell now is a saving throw that the target makes.
Okay.
It's a Constitution save, just like concentration saving throws are Constitution saves. And the spell is only interrupted if they fail their saving throw.
So, Counterspell, huge nerf. Huge nerf.
What this means is not only higher CR monsters will be harder to counter than lower CR monsters, but also flip it around, because sometimes monsters cast Counterspell. It means a higher level player character will be able to resist being countered more than a lower level player character. But wait, there's more. We've also made it so that Counterspell is not a double penalty. And what I mean by that is in 2014, if you succeeded at countering a spell, you not only wasted that spellcaster's action, or bonus action or reaction that they used to cast that spell, you also wasted the spell slot that they used to cast it, if they used a spell slot for it.
Right.
That is actually a larger punishment than the spell is meant to be. And so people will see that in the new version, Counterspell will still essentially waste the action, bonus action, or reaction that was used to cast the spell, but it does not expend the spell slot.
Oh, okay.
And the narrative here is, think of it as, since you interrupted them in the process of casting, they never completed casting the spell.
Right.
And so the resource is not expended, at least the spell slot is not. If they were using some other resource, yeah, it's still gone. But if it's a spell slot, they still have it.
Yeah.
All right, so Counterspell, massive nerf.
Which means you can no longer counter someone's 9th level spell, and their 1 9th level spell slot for the day is gone.
Yeah.
But it does mean they still lost their action. But that's, again, much more where the power was meant to be in Counterspell, is to be able to say nope to that spell in this moment, not, and I've also deprived you of one of your core resources for the rest of the day. So I look forward to people playtesting this new version of Counterspell and Jump, and I'm excited to find out what people think of everything in this UA as well as the UAs ahead of us.
Perfect. And that is Unearthed Arcana 7. It's quite large, and it should be available right now on D&D Beyond, so go check that out and look through the PDF and give us your feedback. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye, everyone.
All right, so that's Unearthed Arcana 7. I am going to go check out Unearthed Arcana 7 as soon as I finish putting this reaction together and getting it out for you guys on YouTube. So there will be lots and lots of Playtest 7 coverage on this channel. I'm going to be going through the whole thing, but I'm going to go through the whole thing and digest it and analyze it and take my time. So there won't be videos very quickly because I want to make sure I'm giving you careful, balanced, reasonable, measured content rather than reactionary content. So that's what you're going to be getting, and it will be coming probably starting next week, would be my guess. So I hope you'll join me for that. Otherwise, I'll see you later as well.